Hey guys, this is MugenLord here, and I'm back again with another Final Fantasy 16 video. If you guys didn't check out my first impressions, you can definitely check that out as well. And today in this video, I want to talk about the Final Fantasy 16 current sales and one particular reason, and that's the homeland of where Final Fantasy was birthed, and that is Japan. It looks like that the sales have pretty much just fell off a cliff by 90% in Japan. So we're going to dive right into this video, but before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button, that notification bell for more gaming content here on the channel. So we're going to dive into it. Now, Final Fantasy 16, like Yoshi P has already predicted, that don't pay attention to the opening sales, but more so look forward to see how the game is going to track beyond after its first week of the game. And we're actually starting to witness this firsthand. We had did a video back like 2 weeks ago talking about how the UK sales wasn't really looking that great, but like I said, if you look into it even farther, they were just the physical sales in the UK. We had to look at the digital, and we have been given an update that has shipped and sold like 3 million copies within its first couple of days, or it's within its first week, which is tracking much slower than Final Fantasy 7 Remake, which Final Fantasy 7 Remake started off really good until that fell off a cliff much later. So a lot of people is just worried about how this game is going to move forward, as far as is the game going to actually have some legs. And Yoshi P himself says he has an 18-month plan on how to push the sales for this game. Now, before we even dive into this article, the whole plan is that they were hoping that Final Fantasy 16 will be able to push consoles, and it looks like that Final Fantasy 16 is not pushing PS5 consoles much as they hoped, especially in Japan. So we're going to dive right into this article right now, then I'll give you my overall thoughts and opinions and to discuss how and what's possibly going on here. So it says on pushsquare.com that Japanese Final Fantasy 16 sales plummet by 90% in the second week. So Japan really doesn't seem as hot on Final Fantasy titles anymore after the 16th mainline entry failed to hand the PS5 a chart topping position. Sales of the game have dropped considerably by 90%. In its first week on the market, Final Fantasy 16 sold just over 336,000 physical copies. However, in its second week of availability, just 37,763 units were shifted. It's generally expected for games to sell worse during the second 7-day span, but not by such a big margin as this one. Now, just like how movies are, and I said this before, you can determine a movie's success, especially in Hollywood, by its second weekend. The first weekend, normally hype drives it up, curiosity, people wants to go check it out. But when it comes to the second weekend, it's normally after people want to go see it for the first time, and they begin to pass word of mouth. People give their opinions on it, and determine, or depending on how good it is, people's going to go back for a second viewing, or more people's going to see it based on other people's reactions and their opinions on it, and that determines whether the drop off is going to be like. So in Hollywood, normally if a movie drops off past 50%, then it's not going to track too well if it passes 50%. Now, if it only drops at 40 or whatever percent, that means the movie's going to have some legs. It's going to do pretty well. But in this case, when it comes to gaming, we have an expected drop off, which most expect within the second week, but 90% in Japan as far as drop off is concerned is very concerning, especially for a title such as Final Fantasy, the homeland where Final Fantasy has come from. And I think that speaks a lot of where the Japanese and the region, how they see Final Fantasy as a brand in today's gaming generation. So we're going to move on, and we'll continue from there. In fact, Final Fantasy 16 wasn't even Japan's best-selling game last week. Nintendo Switch exclusive Master Detective Archives Raincode was beating the Square Enix title by nearly 20,000 units. As documented by Famitsu, PS5 hardware sales were also considerably down last week. Compared to Final Fantasy 16 launch week, roughly 50% less PS5 systems were sold to consumers. In a separate Bloomberg article, 2 Securities analysis, Hideki Yasuda said, This is a very poor result, and it would be impossible to increase sales farther unless the price is significantly lower. Most of the failure is a result of the publicity and the actual game itself being too far from the Final Fantasy of the past, leaving consumers behind. And a lot of you guys, and I've been saying this before, there's a big debate surrounding this game whether or not Final Fantasy 16 or the future of Final Fantasy should move forward in this direction. Now, as I said before, I'm not a big fan of them just actually like shifting genres. This is not even an action RPG. This is just, to me, in my personal opinion, and most people believe this as well, this is just an action game with RPG elements tacked on just to say, hey, this has some resemblance to Final Fantasy. But this game is a full-on action game. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Yoshi P and his team. They have done a great job with Final Fantasy 14, and actually he's carrying Square Enix on his back with Final Fantasy 14. Final Fantasy 14 is the main reason why Square Enix is afloat right now, because Yoshi P and his team. Now, the fact is, a lot of people always consider it and say, hey, it'd be nice if Yoshi P worked on a mainline Final Fantasy game. And I said the same thing. I'm all for a mainline Final Fantasy game made by Yoshi P and the business unit, his team. But the problem is, we finally get him. Instead of us getting what we saw in Final Fantasy 14 in terms of gameplay, and don't have to exactly play like Final Fantasy 14, but he finally gets a mainline title of his own, a title of his own, and the first thing he does is he said, you know what? Let's ditch away some of the traditional mechanics or things that people know and love of Final Fantasy in terms of his gameplay, and let's go full on action. I just think that's the bizarre, most odd, and most weird decisions they have ever made. And the thing is, the fight continues on over Twitter. You know, it's more so from the West. The West, you have a lot of gamers saying, oh, this is the best direction. You don't know what y'all talking about. Final Fantasy 16 is just fine. It is a Final Fantasy game. And I'm still going to say it to this very day. And you'll never change my mind. This game should have been a spinoff. For it to be such a drastic a shift in what it normally is in terms of gameplay conventions, which has always been an ATB menu-based combat system, what most mainline games are expected to have, and that's the standard they had set, you know, for Final Fantasy games. Normally, spin-offs like Strangers of Paradise, Final Fantasy Tactics, all those titles that strays away from its normal conventions, they're normally classified as spin-offs. So you can go into those games with different expectations, that you set your expectations to a certain amount. And all they did was take a Final Fantasy spin-off, which I consider 16 in terms of its gameplay mechanics in its convention. They just took that and then just slapped 16 on it and called it a mainline title. And I think that's the worst thing they have possibly done, because like I said, people has different expectations of what a spin-off is and what a mainline title is. In Japan, which is the homeland of where Final Fantasy come from, they're more into the traditional ATB combat system and what they know and love and expect from a Final Fantasy title. And it's reflecting that in the sales, that it pretty much left fans like me and many others in Japan behind, and they pretty much want to adapt this whole Western ideology when it comes to gameplay. Because come on, Westerners today, they love to just press buttons. They love action gameplay. They just love to mash. They love these type of games. It's that gives you instant gratification and everything like that. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. It depends on what titles that you're putting it in. If a title was built and the spirit is built upon the action or the action RPG, like for instance Scarlet Nexus, really good game. It was built to be an action RPG. Kingdom Hearts has always been built to be an action RPG. So those games will always be accepted for that because it was designed like that from day one. So it's like people who's arguing that, you know, this is Final Fantasy or that the gameplay, it should be the direction it should go. You guys who are, you know, elitists or traditionalists, y'all need to get over it. But how would you feel as a Kingdom Hearts fan if they came in and decided that Nomura came in and said, you know what, it's no longer going to be an action RPG. Kingdom Hearts moving forward the mainline games are going to be turn-based. I guarantee you the same people who's arguing about 16 is perfectly fine, that we should just get over it, will be the same people that will be upset if they decided to take Kingdom Hearts, remove the action RPG elements of it, and then just turn it into a turn-based. You'll be sitting here just like any other traditional Final Fantasy fan saying, hey, this is the stupidest move, or I disagree with this. And that's where we at right now when it comes to this. And as far as the sales, it seemed like it's losing its identity to the Japanese install base, the install base that had gave Final Fantasy prominence, and they're ditching it. Square Enix just has a history of doing this, that they're ditching it for the Western audience. Everything about 16 feels like a Western game, and it's not typically always a bad thing. But we're talking about Final Fantasy, something that's been traditionally Japanese for the very, very longest. You look at the themes of Final Fantasy 16, it does have that Game of Thrones. It has more of a Western type of feel, a Western type of approach, but it just had Final Fantasy elements in it, like your summons, your Moogles, your Chocobos, and everything like that. But that's as far as it goes. That's just the surface level of a Final Fantasy, of what a Final Fantasy game is. But everything else, as far as spirit and everything, it has more of a Western mentality, or a Western type of design or concept of, you know, game design when it comes to this brand new direction. And it's really like turning so many diehard fans such as myself. I'm still playing the game. I've been taking my time. I was trying to get it done this week, but I just don't have the urge to want to play Final Fantasy 16. But I knew this going in. I knew from the start that this game wasn't going to be the game that I knew I was going to like. But, you know, I'm a Final Fantasy fan. I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt to see if the game is going to essentially change my mind as far as me really, really liking the game. But I've just been struggling to get through it, because it's just, to me, in my personal opinion, it's just not a Final Fantasy game that I want from a mainline Final Fantasy game. And, you know, I have respect for those who like it, enjoy it, but I just pray to God that this isn't the direction that they're going to go with this. You know, they just stripped away everything as far as, I'm talking about gameplay. I'm talking about the gameplay conventions of a Final Fantasy game, a mainline Final Fantasy game. I guarantee you, if Final Fantasy 16, they had the medieval aspects of it, of an old, you know, classic Final Fantasy game. I guarantee you, if they added a class system, they already have the medieval fantasy down pat. If you added party customization and full party control, and you added the ATB action menu base, similar to Final Fantasy 7, which you saw in that game, if you added that to Final Fantasy 16, I guarantee you Final Fantasy 16 would be flying off the shelves and be selling PS5 consoles left and right, and it would have me as a true believer of the series. But they didn't go this direction at all. I don't know what they're planning on doing. I don't even think that it's going to surpass Final Fantasy 7 Remake. We have Rebirth on the way. We already got the marketing on that, so people is going to go back and buy Final Fantasy 7 Remake so they can catch up, and maybe so they can be prepared for Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. But Final Fantasy 16 is standing on its own as its own title, and now they went completely action, which straight away and cut majority of their fan base. They have an uphill struggle that they're going to have to just work out, you know. But that pretty much wraps this video. I definitely want to hear your thoughts in the comment sections below. What do you think about Final Fantasy 16 and its sales, as far as it dropping off and plummeting by 90% in Japan? Do you think Final Fantasy franchise and the series will ever get itself together in the media, or, you know, make it climb back into prominence what it used to be back during the PS1 era? We'll have to wait and see. So if you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell for more gaming content on this channel. This is MugenLord signing off. I'll see you game fiends later. Peace out.